So we are live for our second episode of Agencyphonics, but this time we're live. So to my guests, no swearing please. Welcome everybody. Just a reminder of why we do Agencyphonics. Agencyphonics is the vodcast behind the book that Peter Hall and I wrote called Agencynomics. We were constantly under pressure to write less topics and more detail, but we were determined to share as much about the workings of an agency as possible. And it went down quite well. I think we got Amazon 5-star ratings, lots of really good feedback. The book's a year later now, still selling really very, very strong, but we wanted to make sure we could delve a little bit deeper into some of these stories. And for example, today's subject is all about client services and account management, and today's guest is a real expert in this area. But we only wrote 10 pages on account management and direction. I just realized last night when I checked the chapters. So this gives us a great opportunity to go into a lot more detail. And it's quite topical because most of you who are aware of us realize we've just recently commissioned an agency lead generation survey for new business. And whilst the report comes out in the next 10 days or so, we discovered that out of the top 3 lead sources, 2 of those related directly to clients' influence. So clients referring deals and clients leaving their current job, going to a new job and taking the agency with them. So the importance of new business and client services is so up there that I wanted to make sure we bring this to the podcast as soon as possible. And I mentioned this in the book, but my own personal experience, having started an agency and grew it, was that we were notoriously bad at client services. We we tended to only really order take, let's call it. We reacted. We were so busy looking after clients. We were probably sort of 95% reactive, only 5% proactive. And over the years, I've seen that become quite a problem, especially in a smaller growing agency. It's very hard to be proactive when you're reacting all the time to client demands. But it was about 6 or 7, 8 years into the journey when one of our biggest clients said, "Could you come and give us 20 ideas on things that we could do to improve our marketing?" And we went in and we gave 20 ideas, and the client took 3 of those ideas, and we took a £20,000 project and turned it into a £1 million a year account. That I realized that all those years of not being proactive and relying on just new business was really a wasted effort in many aspects. So we did an event recently. Today's guest actually hosted a panel at that event, and we had a client on the panel who was a 20-year experienced CMO, and my guests, they asked the marketing CMO the question: has your agencies ever asked you for an introduction or a referral? Bearing in mind it's one of the main ways that agencies win their biggest clients. And the market CMO said, none of my agencies have ever in 20-30 years of doing this job asked me for a referral, which I thought was amazing. So I've spent the last 2-3 weeks going into my clients trying to make sure they prioritize that area. So today I want to delve a lot more deeper into the whole subject of client services. How do we get better at being more proactive? How do we tap into the lead potential that's there as well? It's not a new thing, client services. When I first discovered the lead generation methodology we talk about in the book called the 30-30-30-10, which is 4 key areas that all agency business comes from. One of those areas was always client referrals and clients taking them with you. But I guess it's realized that if just 2 lead sources generate such a high percentage of new business leads, we really need to give this a lot more attention. So without further ado, one last thing. Thank you to Wirehive, as always. They've kindly let us use their studios today. And it's very supportive because Agencyphonics and Agencynomics is a not-for-profit social enterprise. So obviously all those kind of things that help us create this show is really gratefully received. So thank you, Wirehive. So I'm going to introduce today's guest. Her name is Jenny Plant. She is her business is called Account Management Skills. And what I love about Jenny the most, I'm going to let her introduce herself in more detail in a second. But what I love about her the most is that she started her life as an account exec, and she's worked every single role through an agency business to get to where she is today. Someone who runs a consultancy business, helping agencies improve their client services. So we couldn't have someone better in the room. This isn't someone who hasn't walked doesn't just talk the talk, she's walked the walk. That's such an old cheesy line, that, but we'll use it anyway. So Jenny, welcome. Please tell us all a little bit about your career path to date, just so we get a bit of idea on your background.
Well, first of all, Spence, thank you so much for inviting me on. I feel totally honoured because I'm the second guest after Suzanne. My name's Jenny Plant, and I started in agencies, embarrassingly, over 25 years ago in the early 90s. It was a 90-strong agency in Hatton Garden as an AE. And I was there for 2 years. And those were the days that if you wanted to make an artwork change, you had to cut the bromide up. And most interactions were done on the telephone and by fax machine. And I often say to my students now, the good thing about being around in those days was that you had to pick up the phone. You had to develop those relationships face to face in meetings with clients. But yeah, that was my starting point. And then I did quite a few things, mostly on the agency side. I spent 2 years as a marketing manager for an airline. So I spent a few years after my agency, my first agency, in Barcelona in Spain. I don't know if
so
I've
you
ever
were on the other side of the table.
Yes. So
interesting.
I was. I spent 3 years in Barcelona working for a pharmaceutical company. When I came back, because of my Spanish, I got a job at Iberia Airlines in marketing. And so I also have experience of being on the client side as well, which really gave me a good insight. After that, I ended up in healthcare advertising, so back on the agency side, and that's where I stayed until 2010. And account management skills was born out of the fact that when I was general manager in charge of an agency of like 4 million turnover, 40 people, I was given sales coaching. And I kind of realised then, and obviously we'll probably dive into it a bit more later, but I realised then what I should have known 25 years ago.
Right. And
that's what drives me now to help other account managers understand how much more effective you can be in your role. So yeah, that's kind of the journey to date.
Okay, great. So let's start with talking about the subject of this kind of reactive and proactive. And I know that I see a lot when I go into agencies, and I'm sure you see the same thing. You see account managers who have to, they log in on to check their email first thing in the morning, and before they know it, they're sucked into a day of demands and requests and challenges, and so the biggest sort of feedback and complaint I get often is just, when do I get the time to be proactive? But also, just to add quickly, I think the world's changed a bit, because actually in many ways when you started, an account manager was almost like a project manager as well, and would almost do everything, because maybe the marketing activities weren't that complicated, whereas in today's world of digital, there's an element of complexity involved with some of the project management side of the account manager's job. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, what are the steps for an account manager or an account director to shift from being someone who is reactive and feeling like, how do they break that to become proactive?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing is to step back from the business and actually have a plan for which accounts you see the potential to grow, for example. Because we all know as agencies, I mean, there's that statistic I shared the other day. It's something like 5 to 25 times more expensive to go out and get new business than it is to focus on your existing accounts. And the other statistic, that if you increase your retention rate by 5%, you can increase your profit margin by between, I don't know, it's 25 to 95%.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, it makes total sense to nurture those existing relationships, not only for the growth potential in those clients, but also who they can then refer you to. Right. So it's so much cheaper and easier.
So rather than looking at everybody going, I've got all these clients, how do I be proactive? Start to just prioritize which ones you want to invest the time with first.
Exactly. Which ones do we want to grow? Which ones have the ability to grow? And then making up a plan to say, right, how are we going to do it?
Yep.
Because and I know, you are always at certain points in a client relationship. If the relationship hasn't really started yet, or it's gone a bit bad, then you're in kind of band-aid mode. You're in, let's get them to trust us again, let's do good work, and let's deliver quality. If you're looking at growth potential, you're not going to be focusing on that client, because you've got to get them back on an even keel. So it's like a constantly moving feast, and that's why the first thing I say in answer, going around the houses, in answer to your question, step back, have a look at what's categorize your clients, look for the opportunities, and where can I be most effective.
And probably when you take a step back as well, I guess, look at your time management as well, because we're all guilty of getting creatures of habit, humans, right? So we get into this habit of routines, and sometimes it's breaking those routines. And I don't know if you have any tips around this, but I remember a couple of agencies were saying things like, don't look at emails until 11 o'clock in the morning. Spend the first 2 hours just doing proactive, and then start, tuning into the demands or the requests from clients. Or take a day a week that is your, proactive Thursdays or something. I mean, does that work or not? I mean, it sounds ideal if I just rattle it off like that, but in practice,
I think it depends. I think there's an element of truth in that, batching your time that you spend looking at your emails. Because I remember, and I was guilty of everything. I mean, there's probably not one bad situation I haven't been in with a client, and not one error that I haven't made in my roles as an account manager. And one of them, and I think this is a biggie, and I hadn't realised how big it was distractions. So you set out, I mean, I've got quite a few tips on time management, but one of the biggest is if you're sitting there and you're watching your emails popping up, or you've got your Slack channel going off, or your WhatsApp group going off, if you get distracted, I didn't realise this, but it takes up to 15 minutes to get back to the task that you were doing. Right. So if you add that up in your 8-hour day, typically, how much time is lost through just being distracted? The other thing that I recently it really was drummed into me, was having a different place physically for different tasks. So at your desk, if you're doing sort of more transactional tasks, making calls, sending an email, that's fine. But if it comes to a point where I need to generate a proposal, or I need to really concentrate on this, then always consider kind of moving, going into a meeting room, go to a coffee shop, just where you can change your environment. Or if you're going to have a meeting, go to the sofas, have different spots for different tasks. And it was something my business mentor sort of highlighted to me recently, and I thought, that would have been really useful when I was in account management, because I was battling through all the time at my desk. And funny enough, sometimes I used to watch people go outside that smoked, and I didn't smoke. And I was a little bit envious, because I thought, actually, you look like you're really thinking about things and considering things. So that's one tip.
I do like that around the daily routine, because and there is a Dan Pink, I can't remember the book, just wrote a book.
Drive, was it?
No, he wrote a book recently about, we'll put it in the show notes, around human beings and the whole argument, I think, around larks and owls, and I wrote this down recently, what my perfect day looks like. And if I do detail work in the morning, but it can't be at home and it can't be in the office, it has to be a third place of work. I can clear 200 emails in 2 hours.
Amazing.
But I can't do 200 emails in a normal week, if I, with the interruptions, everything. So it is, I think, about time blocking, and I think it is about, taking control of your diary a little bit to do that.
Have you heard of Pomodoro?
Yes, I have, yeah.
See, that's another one.
I used that for a while. It was a few years ago, actually.
Well, I found that really effective. So Pomodoro, if anyone doesn't realise or know about this, it's 25-minute blocks of time. So you literally set the timer, shut down everything else, and just do one thing. And then 5 minutes, take a stretch, stand up, change your environment. Then you can come back and do another Pomodoro. Because I went on funny enough, I haven't told you this, but a book writing boot camp. And we used to
Don't do it. It's a nightmare.
I didn't end up writing the book, which is one of my biggest embarrassing regrets. But I did 4 Pomodoros in a row, with those 5-minute breaks before you have to take an hour. So it's these little things, and being prepared the night before, I know sometimes you walk through the office door and everything, it's mayhem and you're going into firefighting, but planning your night before just gives you that space. I think it's all about taking the time out
So the shift from being reactive to proactive. First, I think we're saying that time is really important. I think that's definitely one element. The other element I like that you said then was about the relationship with the client, because sometimes you're in a mode where you're almost having to prove that you can build their trust up, do a good job. But it's a little bit chicken and egg, that, because actually if you have my largest client, the one that we grew from 20,000 project to £1 million a year account, if she ever had a problem or she was unhappy, she would always call us and tell us and give us the opportunity to fix it first, right? Because that's the strength of the relationship that we had. Now, we worked really hard on the relationship outside of the work to make sure that we had that trust and chemistry, and that as a result made our lives easier, because we weren't always on the back foot. And I remember there was a LinkedIn post I once commented on with you about doing a good job for clients, and Robert Solomon actually came on. I quoted him, and he actually was on one of your friends on LinkedIn connections. I was really embarrassed, but that saying, which I haven't got to hand, but he wrote in his book, which is probably the more than the 10 pages we wrote in Agencynomics about client services, because he wrote a book, The Art of Client Services.
That's it, yeah.
And he actually had like 52 ways you can improve your client service. I should have made a list of those 52 ways, because that would probably be quite a useful checklist. But he wrote in the book that he used to think that great work led to more great work and led to a great client relationship. And what he realized was that a great client relationship actually leads to better work, because a better client, because great work entails trust. And he said that once you've got that trust, the clients will give you a free will to take risks and to do more interesting projects. And so that, when I read that, it was like one of those eureka moments, where everything sort of hits you and go, that's exactly right, because that large client trusted us to listen to our suggestions. And the great work, yes, led to more great work, of course, but it was the relationship strength. And I think not enough agencies measure the quality and strength of their relationship as well as the work. It's one or the other. And in fact, yesterday I was with a client who said that one of their clients said to them, you're really, really good at the work, but the last agency used to do a lot more. They used to tell us what our competition were up to. They would actually keep us informed with trends. They would, and there was this almost learning and educational side. And I think we sort of talked in the book a lot about the different styles of clients. But, some clients, they want different things from experience, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, do you in your job, how do you approach that with the client service teams, account managers, to get them to understand that balance of the relationship as well as the work? Is there a process that they have to do that, or is it just a process? I mean,
with the relationship building, I think the first thing to say is I read a study a while ago, and I share this with my account managers. It was written by Tim Williams, who's Ignition Consulting Group.
My hero, actually. I'd love to get him on this show one day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pricing strategist. And he was commissioned to do this global study between agencies and clients. And you can find the report online. It was done a few years ago, and it was what clients want most from their agencies. And one of the biggest things was, what's the one reason that you would stop a relationship with a client, with an agency? And they said, because they never gave us anything that we didn't ask for. So we think we're doing good work and we're delivering on time, on budget, and the brief and everything, but actually deep down what they want is extras. So what you've just said sort of confirms that. They're looking for you to surprise them. They're looking for, and it doesn't really take a lot sometimes, a bit of Google alerts. You've got a piece of information, sending it to them first. And fundamentally what this comes down to is understanding their business. And I think if you are really good at understanding what's important to them, what's the business outcome that they want you to achieve, because they're not giving you money for nothing. So if you can have that conversation and bring your account managers up to have that commercial discussion so that the client suddenly thinks, they get me, they get it, then I think that just forms the trust. And I think the proactivity comes naturally. Sometimes, you know what, Spencer, it's just really simple. It's about pointing it out, coaching your team, and being, you know, giving them, you can't motivate people, but understanding what their intrinsic motivators are, and connecting those motivations to your ultimate goal in the agency, and being transparent with the journey and celebrating success.
I think you're right. The intrinsic, because I must want to be clear here that not all clients want to have a good experience. Some just want the work to be accurate and them not to look like, not that you're making them look good in their job by not making mistakes. Almost like you, sometimes we find we're scapegoats because if something goes wrong, we're going to fire the agency. It wasn't my fault. But actually, some clients, it is just about the detail and the attention to detail. But I had a call a couple of years ago now, I won't name names to embarrass the agency owner, and he rang me up and said, I really could do with some advice, Spencer. And the funniest thing about this particular agency is he grew the business like from 0 to 200 people in 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
The first thing I heard was, you're asking me for advice? Like, I mean, genuine. He said, oh, don't say that. It was quite flattering because he said, I came to a lot of your talks in the early days and I stole loads of stuff from you. He said, don't worry, most of it came from you. I was like, well, that was quite a nice compliment. But he said that he'd had his best ever performing client who just resigned, and he couldn't understand why they'd resigned. They'd had the best ever success in terms of their CPAs and their marketing, the actual results and outcome was one of their highest performers, and the clients never had an agency perform as well, but the client resigned. And he said the reason for it was that the agency lacked offering them any client experience. Now,
meaning what?
Obviously, he said, I'm asking you, what does that mean?
Oh.
And I was saying, well, it could mean lots of things. It could be exactly what you just said then, that the client was expecting them to give them more insights around their trends in their business, more value adds in terms of helping them look good in their job, in terms of giving them more knowledge. It could have been training, so it could have been bringing them in to, help them understand where the trends are going, maybe helping them win awards internally for the work so that it made them, again, perhaps their own career is important. So it's intrinsic motivation of the client. You've got to find out. And I think it's probably worth, do you do exercises around that? In a weird way, we do. Yeah, what do you do? Tell me.
That's exactly what we do, because actually when it comes down to it, it's all very well having a list of tactics. Oh, we've got to bring new ideas, or we've got to repitch, or that's all good in theory, but actually what's behind the account manager sitting there thinking, I know I've got to do this? They might be fearful, embarrassed, they might be shy, they might not get on with the client, they don't know even how to start. But some account managers really respond well to frameworks, conversation frameworks, ways of opening up the discussion. So it really does come down to, and I go through a framework for also creating equal business stature with a client, because I'm all for service, not servitude. If you're judged by the quality of the questions you ask as well. So doing a little bit of homework about the client, really getting under their skin and opening up those conversations in a way that you're really listening and saying, what else? Tell me a bit more about that. And then you can start getting into the grounds of offering solutions. But what's the point in coming up with solutions? Because that's time consuming before you've really diagnosed. So one of the analogies I use is think of yourself as a specialist, a doctor. If you go to a doctor and they say, oh, I know what you need within 5 minutes before you've actually told him how you're feeling, say, there's a medication, that would be malpractice. And yet often I find that a lot of agencies feel like they have to be on broadcast, they have to be showing their creds, they have to be talking about themselves, we're this, we're doing that. But actually the client doesn't want that. They just want you to solve their problem. Listen to me, I will tell you. And just the better you are at listening and asking questions, really good questions, in the right way, in a nurturing way, not in an abrasive way, you will uncover the real pain, the real challenge that the client wants you for. Because we're fixing a pain.
And do you think that came, you mentioned earlier on that your sales training
totally.
sort of changed you know, and it's funny, when I heard you first say that, actually I went away and I realized that it was another one of those eureka moments, that by having sales training, you learn sales process and you learn about asking questions and listening. So would you say that sales training probably goes hand in hand with that shift from being also proactive to reactive, because actually you're learning to have more confidence than when you're in that situation, you know how to deal with the situation?
Definitely, 100%.
How did it change you, sales training?
Well, I was one of these people that really responded well. There was not enough that they could tell me. I was just, oh my God. But I had to put it into practice immediately, because I was general manager of Publicis, so
Right.
Publicis Life Brands, the healthcare side. And so I had a client, and I think I told this in the last Agencynomics event, the client was worth something like 1.4 million. For a 4 million agency, that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
Okay, so really important client. And my sales trainer was kind of saying to me, so how much do you know about this client, the business, you know, their pains, the challenge? I didn't really know enough. So I made a call, and it was the first time I'd ever really put into practice this questioning and listening. What
Okay.
else? Tell me more. Tell me a bit more about that. By the end of it, I was on the phone for an hour, and he felt like we'd connected, and that was the first time. But more importantly, what I'd found out was they were considering repitching the business.
Yeah.
Now, this was in the first year of a launch, which didn't make sense for them from a business point of view. So only by knowing it, I was able to talk him out of it and then extend the life of the relationship. So actually, it's in these moments,
Yeah.
and that's why your account managers are ready. I'll give you another example. Sorry, I'm on a roll.
No, go for it.
So one of my account managers, she was with a client who was going through an acquisition, and she was with him, and she could see that he had to prepare certain presentations for the acquiring company, and it was just a matter of her saying, is there anything we can help with? And she came back to the agency with two projects worth 60,000. So it's the moments. And that's why it's really important that an account manager has that kind of top of mind, but also has the motivation to make it happen.
Yeah.
Because I think you said earlier on, if an account manager is really busy, 100 miles an hour, this is real life, right? This is the truth.
Yeah.
The account manager says to me, confides, some, not all, why should I go and get more business?
Yeah.
Because I'm busy enough as it is. And sometimes they say, I don't trust that the senior management team's going to resource enough, so it's all going to land on my shoulders. Now, that is the raw truth of it. But when the right account manager gets the right training and he's able to put it into practice, it's just magic, and it's cheaper and easier.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And
great.
it's adding value, more importantly. I'm not talking about...
Yeah. What was going through my head then when as you were speaking is also just the importance of the agency leadership team to make sure that the vision is clear. This time of year, because a lot of companies have calendar year ends with the clients that we work with in the day job and the consultancy side of things, we're asking the client service teams to come back and present what are their account plans for next year. So who are their clients? You know, what did they spend with us last year? You know, which of you sort of talked about those top clients. We break them down to A, B, C, D. I don't know if you do a similar thing.
Yeah, gold, silver, black.
Okay, so
bronze,
that
yeah.
sounds even probably slicker than ABCD, but and try to anticipate what levels of revenue they're going to spend next year, because that helps with the resource planning, to be clear as well. But also by setting out some goals at the beginning of the year, the company and the client service team have got, you know, like saying if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. At least they've got a motivation and a reason. They know why they're trying to grow the business, because the business overall is growing or going somewhere, and they're part of that, an important cog in that wheel. And you know, for some agencies, new business is, client service business is like 100% of the billings. Like it just comes from existing clients. Mm-hmm. And then I know that. I mean, in my agency, it was actually as low as about 30%. So only 30% each month. 70% came from new business.
Wow.
I know, because we kept doing projects and just kept. We weren't really go back.
Yeah.
It sounds stupid, but
It doesn't. It just happens, doesn't it?
I didn't come from an agency background, right? So I was just learning as and now I go, you know, I remember meeting another agency owner who said they doubled their business just by focusing on their clients for a year rather than new business. and it worked. And I think, and to be clear now, I would always say it's a three-pronged attack. I think you grow your clients, you have to get the new business working, because there are a lot of problems if you just stick with your clients, because sometimes it's hard to get the day rates up. Sometimes the people in the team aren't getting more interesting new work in. So you do have to have a bit of a mix. And for some people, they actually have to do acquisition to grow. So there's a whole other side. If maybe the agencies are owned by often creatives or technical people, it tends to be less sales driven. We were obviously a bit more sales driven, so that's why that happened. But I think the vision seeping through so that the account directors understand, what's in it for them and why are they doing it and how important it is. I think buying in must be really important.
I think it's really important. I think I agree with what you're saying. I think the more you can bring in the account manager to understand the bigger picture, they feel, because a lot of account managers say to me, I want to be more strategic, or I want to be promoted. That's two of the biggest things they tell me. And actually, you have the opportunity to be strategic in your client development plan, and you're planning and strategizing for how you're going to grow this piece of business. So that's the first thing. They get very, lit up by that.
And we were saying before, actually, we started, that it's probably the one role in the business, like an account exec can become a managing director of an agency. Like, it's unusual for it's unusual for a designer to become manager. I mean, they might become creative director, but they don't become manager. So, and you just said you did as well, like general manager or managing director. There is this natural path of the commerciality, understanding the clients, and going from account exec to an account manager, account director, client service director, and then move to general manager and perhaps MD, and maybe you go and start your own agency one day. That's not uncommon. So really, if an account person a client service person wants to have a career, it's in their grasp, right? By mastering their craft, they can really probably, more than other roles in the business, probably get that top job as well, ultimately.
Yeah, and I think that's why they're so receptive to sales training. And the other thing is, the word sales sometimes
in agencies, a dirty word.
A what?
In an agency, sales is a dirty word.
It is a bit, isn't it?
Because it's
particularly
like,
for account
we
managers.
want to talk about the work. We don't want to talk about selling.
Yeah, I know. And actually, for me, I'll be honest. For me, it was as well. And I didn't even think of myself in the business of sales. So when I started realizing, and the thing is about Sandler, which was the sales training that I had, it's not being salesy.
Sandler's like the top one, isn't it? It's like quite.
I don't know the other ones, to be honest.
No.
I'm just. It's all based in psychology, based on transactional analysis, which is a theory from the 1950s from a guy called Eric Berne. It's very deep. The core of it, but it's just so effective because you're not selling anything to anyone. You are uncovering what the needs are, what the challenges are, because people buy emotionally.
And do you know that I was reading one of those business books by a Navy SEAL. I laugh at myself when I say it out loud, because we're not running armies, but I'm always learning, right? And there was this great, I think I might have mentioned him last podcast, but Jocko Willis, I think his name was, and he wrote this podcast, and so he wrote this audiobook. We spoke in the audiobook. I'll get it right in a minute. And he said this, he helps businesses now, and he said what's really fascinating is that in business, or in the army, you have to drill, because you don't go to battle every day. So you have to practice, because there's that one day when you really need to, kill the enemy and not your friends, and you need to be fully skilled up, you master of your craft. But weirdly, in businesses, we don't really drill, we don't really practice because and let's lead on to this conversation about asking your clients. So I mentioned at the beginning my tenuous link about how you'd ask that client. It was a great question, by the way. Have you ever been asked by one of your agencies to refer you to somebody else? And she said not in 20, 30 years. What was it, 20 years, 30 years? It felt like it was forever. 25, 30 years. But it's very difficult. Someone said to me yesterday, how would you ask a client? I thought, I don't do this every day. So weirdly, I was sort of stuttering. It's a bit like when I get in a taxi and a taxi driver says, what do you do for a living? I'm like, because I don't tell people every day what I do. It's probably different when I had my agency. I did, and I knew I could rattle it off my elevator pitch. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I think we need to practice more internally, do more drills, sit down around a table and say, well, what are the 10 ways we could ask a client if they wouldn't mind introducing us? And I did write this on a LinkedIn post, but someone rang me after that event and said, do you know, it was really weird hearing that client say no one had ever asked them. And we were in LA or San Francisco, and our biggest client a week later turned around to us and said, why did you never ask me for introductions to people I know in my network? And he was like, it was so spooky, like the serendipity of the fact that he'd heard that. He then thought about it, and then he said, but how embarrassing, my biggest client is actually saying to me, why do you never ask me for referrals? So
amazing, just shows you.
Yeah, so what I've done the last couple of weeks, I've actually asked all the clients to list out their top 10 or 20 clients and then set a time frame of like 4 to 6 weeks to ask everybody.
Great.
But I think it's how do you ask? And I think I often talk about leveraging. If someone's asking you for a favour, say, would you do me a favour back?
Yeah.
And I mean, do you do any work around that, or?
So I've got 2 things to say about this.
Yeah.
The first thing is, there's a point in time you should ask, which is the optimum time.
Okay.
Which is just after something's gone really well, where they're saying something.
Yes.
I know it's obvious.
Yeah.
But they're saying something.
No, but it's obvious. But I'm laughing because actually it's like, yeah, of course, Eureka. Yeah.
Yeah.
When something's good.
Yeah, when something's just gone well, and you have to, like the muscle, you have to get into the habit of saying thank you so much for that piece of feedback. By the way, and that's the moment. So in answer to your question, it's not always relevant to say it, but in those moments, it's your hot time to say it. The other thing to say is there's a softer way of approaching referrals, which I think give first. So, for example, particularly if you have a big corporate company that you are working with, maybe one brand team, and you could be working with several other departments or different brand teams, then offer some piece of training, for example. So say, look, typically when we work with our clients, what they find really valuable is our educational series. I'm not sure if I've explained this before, but we do a series of lunch and learns. 25 minutes. It's the hot topics that's in the industry. We come in, we bring the sandwiches, and we sit down and we round the table and we teach you something. And the even cleverer thing to do, and the reason I'll get to the referral in a minute, but is to say, look, there's a number of topics that we're currently running. And many of our clients are loving this. So it's always using a third-party story, and they will look down and say, actually, I like that topic and that topic. Say, great, okay, let's get out our diaries. We'll come in. By the way, is there anyone else from the company that you'd like to invite along? Given that we're going to be coming for that first time. Now, that's the point where they're going to invite their other brand, their mates in the office. They're all going to be in a room, and then it's your job to work the room basically and create those relationships, because you're going to be standing there as the educator, as the more informed one, and they're going to be seeing you as the authority. So that's another way. So 2 ways. That's a referral strategy that you can implement. But asking at the right time when things are going well, it's just a matter of, hey, things are going really well in the agency. We're expanding. We're looking for new opportunities. Don't suppose you know anybody that you could introduce us to. Or you go one step further and look at their LinkedIn connections, and you actually choose who you would like to be introduced to. And you say, look, I noticed you're connected to X.
Which is what that lady client said in San Francisco. She said, go through my LinkedIn, tell me who you want an introduction to, and I'll intro you.
Brilliant.
So that is really, really simple. So would you be as prescriptive as me and say set a target to do that in a time frame? You would.
So when I work with agencies, everyone sets their own 90-day goal. I call, at the end of the workshop, we set a 90-day goal, because 90 days is kind of achievable, but they can still do something. So a lot of momentum from the ideas that are generated. It's right, like, you capture that, you set yourself a goal, and what are your actions to take? And then they've set it. There's no good giving someone a goal, because that's demotivating. It's, especially for account managers, because it's all about those relationships.
So a couple of things around client service process. When you obviously have meetings with your clients around the service that you're delivering on a regular basis. So people have like a monthly account review or a quarterly account meeting. You mentioned lunch and learn there as well as maybe a second thing that is more proactive, sharing information, helping them feel informed, educational. Really like that. Is there anything else in the process? Are they the two main things that you must do on a regular basis with your key clients?
I think also pricing is an opportunity to
Right.
explain to a client how else you can help.
Okay.
So if a client says, look, I've got this brief, you could say, look, typically when we work with our clients, they like us, regardless of the budget, to give them what we could potentially do if money wasn't an object.
Right.
Then an option within your budget constraints, and then sort of a smaller option.
Yeah.
And psychologically, according to BlairEnn's book,
Yeah.
Pricing Creativity, giving three choices
Here's another one we've got to get on the podcast.
it's amazing. It is psychologically better. So you're actually giving them more visibility over the other things you could be doing. So working backwards, this is a business challenge, this is the brief. Actually, there's not one way we can do this. There are several things that we could be doing.
Yeah.
And then, because a lot of clients say, well, I didn't know you even did that. That pricing, if you gave them a pricing package, it's an opportunity to show what else you could be doing.
Yeah.
So in some ways, that is a growth opportunity.
Okay. So around the other areas, as well, I was thinking as you were talking then, was things like helping other benefits to clients would be things like peer networking as well. So I think sometimes for me, introducing clients to other clients was great because they had empathy with each other, they could relate to each other, they could learn from each other as well. So helping them with their networking with other clients is probably quite a good thing to set up, which would kind of work alongside, I guess, if you did events, if you could bring them out to do those things.
Yeah.
And also, do you ever do team building? I had an agency once who did team building with their clients, the account direction team, to team building, and got them together, and I think they did like barbecue cooking or something random like that. But it was great because they got to spend a period of time with each other, getting to know each other better, and actually made the relationship stronger as a result of it. But I guess sometimes in this kind of world of corporate governance, maybe they're not always allowed to do things like that, I suppose, in some sectors. But
That's true, actually. In healthcare particularly, there's some restrictions. I think it's understanding the client.
Less so in other sectors.
And other sectors. But understanding the client and what makes them tick, because there's a social styles model where you categorize people's different sort of behavior types, and if you've got a driver who's typically very red, very kind of let's get to the goal, don't ask me about my weekend, I just need this done, then you're going to have a very different approach.
So my business partner Pete, I have to get one gag in about Pete every time he's not here. Sorry, he's not like that really.
Is he really?
No, he's not. He's not.
So one approach isn't going to work the same way as someone who's a lot more amiable, so they're more interested in you as a person and maybe going for a barbecue. But some client, depends on the client. I don't have time for that. And do there was the IPA, they have a business conference every year, and I went last year, and there was this brilliant lady on stage called Lisa Thomas. She's head of brand for Virgin. You can't get much of a top job than that. But she's actually ex-agency as well. She was CEO for MC Saatchi.
Okay.
She said, and she was like telling off the audience, I thought it was brilliant. She said, agencies say to me, how can I enter in the conversation and talk to the C-suite and get more business? And she said, you got to know this, guys. In the boardroom, we're not talking about creative. We're not talking about stuff. We're talking bottom line. How are you going to grow my business? How are you going to add revenue to the bottom line?
Yeah.
So the language needs to change. And that's the other thing, talking about your drilling. How can we practice these conversations, practice asking questions, understand all of the metrics, understand the business outcomes that we're achieving? That's a different language. It's a different skill set to what we're usually used to doing.
Yeah,
which
it
is,
really helps
yes,
with
Mr. Client, I can do that, Mr. Client.
And it really helps with the pricing as well, because if you understand the value of the solution that you're able to solve for that company, what the commerciality is, actually it's easy to price it based on the value of the rather than just by a day rate, right? So those are difficult questions, and sometimes you have to be quite a bit more commercially astute, I guess. Did you find that at all on your journey? You get the sales training, but was there an area where you hit a certain point where maybe there's a business commerciality that was different?
Definitely. I think as you're going up the ranks, as you get more senior, you're going to have this shift between you're an account manager doing transactional work, delivering on time, on budget, but then you have to shift and you're the most senior person in the room and you've got to kind of steer the conversation. You've got to be taken seriously. You need to be able to add value. So entering into the client's language is really, really important. And I think this is why a lot of the account managers that are going up the ladder, maybe they want to be an MD, this kind of stuff they really drink in. You know, this, I want to be able to talk the client's language. And once someone says, hey, why don't you look at the company's house, or why don't you look at their website and download the report and accounts, annual report and accounts, read the executive summary, learn about the business, actually a lot of account managers respond to that because they want to be informed as well.
It's such a lost art, that, I think, downloading companies their own manifestos and seeing their own, you know, annual statements and seeing what the vision is, and to really understand their business and then speak their language. I heard someone in New Business talk about it recently. So I had a client earlier on speak to me, and he said, but my problem is the clients won't meet me.
Yeah.
They won't meet with me. I try to meet with them, but just won't meet with me on one breath. And I said, well, I'm a busy person too, but my diary, you know, it gets a lot clearer in January, February now. So you've got to think ahead a little bit, like put dates in ahead. I mean, are there any, do you think that's just an excuse? Do you think that that's, you know, is that, what I was worried about, I guess, on the phone call was that genuinely the client, or is that actually a lack of training, commerciality, and how to get the client to meet you? Is there, you know?
You never know, really. You never know if it's the approach. And also, we're all busy. Like if someone's
especially
saying,
marketing people, they are the busiest, right?
Like I haven't got time for that, because they're under a lot of pressure. And I think this is what we forget. We're about that amount of time of their day. They've got loads of other things to do. They're answering to their board as well. So that's the other thing. Like, I think if you're not bringing any value and you just want to catch up, it's kind of, it's quite a selfish way, really, because you're thinking it's all about me. I want your time for me. So I think bringing, like we said, bringing some value, maybe inviting them to something, but it's understanding what's important to them, what's going on in their business. So it's a little bit chicken and egg. The other thing that I've been talking to a lot of agencies recently about is when I left Publicis in 2010, I spent a little bit of time working for a consultancy called Relationship Audits and Management.
Okay.
Super guys, they've been around for years and they have a lot of benchmark data with client agency relationships. And my job as a consultant was to go in to client offices on behalf of agencies, sit with their clients, interview them, come away, write a report, present the findings. Now, the reason I worked for them was because I pulled them in when I was general manager for a client that we were having trouble with. So you really,
it's like mediation in a way.
It is. Yeah. A lot of agencies use this service when they're just about to acquire another agency, because actually you really get under the skin of is that client relationship really strong or not. So anyway, it was so enlightening, and as a result of what I learned through the report they did for me, again, I was able to extend that life of that relationship. So if you are struggling, what I'm coming round to saying is, you could possibly, if you've tried everything, try using an external person, because you could set it up to say, look, our most valued customers, we do invest in doing an audit, you know, so do you have 20 minutes that you could spend with an external consultant to come and sit with you? Now, you purposely say 20 minutes because everyone thinks that's manageable, but inevitably, in my experience, when I was interviewing those clients,
it's 3 hours.
Oh my God. Yeah, but again, sometimes they tell an external person what they feel they can't tell you.
So that's interesting. And I recently was with a client who was going through a rebrand, and part of that rebrand process was to talk to the clients about their perceptions of the agency. And I think that could be another way of doing it as well, because actually the results of that almost client survey that was on the back of a rebrand actually showed that and they had strong client services in this agency, but they were all saying we would buy more if we knew more about how you could sell us. It was like really quite scary to hear every client saying we love the agency, we'd buy more only if you just came and showed us what else we could buy from you.
See, that was one of the questions on the survey that I had to ask.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely spot on.
So I'm almost feeling like from this conversation today, we should be urging everybody to run an external client survey to try and find out a little bit, because actually sometimes the truth hurts, but sometimes it's very revealing and actually could uncover. And the thing I really wanted to just, we're coming close to the end of our time now, but I wanted to just also cover off was lifetime value of clients, because the other part of this conversation this morning was very timely, was, you know, it's not cost effective for three of us to go to the north of England to see this client who is of X value. And I was saying, I think that's too short-term thinking, because, you know, if in the survey, so in the benchmark survey, you know, to put this in context for people listening, there were 38 different ways that lead sources of where agencies' biggest deals had come from. So if you looked at an agency's biggest deal and you track back that lead, there was only 38 ways that typically came in. And 12 of those ways were 80% of all new business wins. And 2 of those 12, and the top 2 out of 3, were related to clients, which is why I'm moving this to the top of the agenda today. But for me, ex-client, when we looked at the data even further, and the full report is still out in the next 10 days, it actually showed that the biggest deals came from ex-clients, so clients that had clearly maybe started out at an agency as a marketing manager, that had gone to a marketing director, that had gone to a CMO, that had been loyal and trusted and had the relationship with their agency, who obviously continually performed, has taken them with them to the point where, so the lifetime value of that client relationship, we mustn't forget about that. It's not just about what we're doing now. It's the reality is that it could be something that goes on for 10 or 15 years, and their career will hopefully take you with them. So it's stop looking too short term, I think. It's another thing that I'm realizing now.
That's a great point, because some of my agency account managers, they have clients abroad, you know, and say, well, it's not that easy, Jen, I can't get on the train or the plane to Switzerland. And I say, well, if it's a platinum client and you see that the growth opportunity's there, then it's an investment.
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, opportunity cost is almost what you've got to look at instead. So is it, just to finish off with, you've obviously been doing client service related things for 25 years, and in particular last 4 or 5 years now focusing on running your own consultancy. What's the sort of, are there any nuggets, was there any bits of advice that you would, you know, urge agencies, owners, or the client service teams to do? Is there anything that really is your one big thing, takeaway for everyone listening?
Oh God, pressure.
Oh, no,
I should have prepared
sorry.
something. No, it's okay. I think I mentioned it before, though. It's the elephant in the room that the account manager has to be motivated.
Yeah.
Because it's not hard. It's not rocket science. It's just behaviours.
Yeah.
A little bit of technique, but mindset is the biggest thing. So if your mindset's not right, either you don't want to do it, you're demotivated, you're not going to perform for the agency leader. So get to know your team, get to understand their intrinsic motivations, and make sure that they are motivated enough, because whatever I come and teach someone that's just not engaged, they're not going to do anything. So I think the secret to this growing accounts is whoever's on your front line with your client, make sure that they're okay. You know.
Okay. Thank you for your time today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been wonderful talking to you.
It's been amazing.
Thanks to everyone listening. Please, we will create the show notes over the next 24 hours. So all of the books we've referenced and companies, etc., etc., we'll put all the details in there. And stay tuned for the next episode. Please hit subscribe and like. That's an order from the marketing manager. So thank you very much. And we're done. So how was that?
Amazing.
We're probably still live. People are still listening to us with the after chat.
That's all right. They do that.